Welcome to the Shifting Realities podcast. I'm your host, Julie Allison, and with me is my co host and friend, as always, Rob Perry. Hi, Rob.
Hello there.
In today's podcast, we're going to go into something that is I'm going to say very dear to my heart, but actually it should be dear to everybody's heart. And that is talking about using what I call about your DNA story. Today, we are going to go a little bit into depth of DNA and what it is in terms of a spiritual viewpoint rather than the scientific viewpoint. I think we do have a few differences there, but we welcome all the scientist views on this, but we want to go way beyond and look at what we might do with some of what's classed as the junk DNA and some of the ways where we're using it to help with healing. So what do I mean about all this? Well, if we look at what DNA is from a spiritual viewpoint, I personally have had lots of downloads, if you like, lots of information from my guides or my higher self or my source or whatever you want to call them on the very origins of not just human, but the very origins of the beginning of time. And as I've said before, it feels like consciousness is the very first thing. Consciousness is the thing that exists. But then from consciousness wanted to live a little and have some experiences. And so from consciousness, and I don't know all of this, it's like a knowing of that we did it, but I don't know the ins and outs of DNA creation. But basically, the way we could create form is in part respects is creating a huge storage space, let's say, of data in order to then create that form. And that came in the form of what we term in human. Remember, this is a human term, DNA. But remember, there is so much beyond human in what we can understand with DNA. So why would I even want to speak about DNA and why it helps with healing? Well, with DNA, if you imagine DNA basically like a huge computer system. And I, Julie, am a laptop and Rob here is a mobile phone, and we're all separate, so you've got separate devices, how we understand, in 3D form. So when we come right down into the 3D, into the three-dimensional form, we understand life is separated. We think about separation far too much, actually, but we think about life being separated. But as a laptop or as a mobile phone, you can go into the World Wide Web, as we call it, and tap and Google just about anything in the world in this day and age, because so much information has been stored in the World Wide Web in many, many forms, with many, many perceptions and through many, many experiences. But to me, the computer analogy is very much coming from DNA. So with DNA, we as humans think we are separated. But when you ask questions on who am I and what am I here for, we end up, when we go within and ask that question, so there's this going within again, my guides, personally, my guides, and anybody who asks this question can go in and see the origins of time and how DNA has grown and expanded. And the way we can do that is what we are doing is asking a question. So we're connecting to a version of Google, let's say. There are many other versions of searches. So we can do a search within ourselves, just by asking the question. And we can ultimately, as humans, ask the question about who am I as a human. So we can ask about all of our, what we class as past lives, but we can also tap in and ask using the version of World Wide Web, just by asking of what is, who am I in connection with planet Earth? Who am I in connection with the universe? So we can tap into the whole universe. And remember here, there are many, many versions of universes. We've talked about frequency before, but we can tap in to what we would class as a memory. So it's like a memory bank of information, of storage of information. So it's like tapping into a filing cabinet, if you like, if you want to do it in a physical term. Basically, you can ask any question in the world of your own DNA, and you will be able to get the answers of your own DNA. But there's also that element, and it's hard to explain this, but there's that element of everything. This is why we say everything is connected. So to me, in my opinion and my experience, everything is connected through DNA, through the storage that creates a memory bank. So I can connect with the beginning of time and whatever planets were in the universe, and find that consciousness. So DNA is a form of consciousness. To me, consciousness was first and created DNA, but DNA is part of how we would class as that consciousness, that where we have that feeling, that experience, that knowing of things. So we ultimately can tap in to the beginning of time, and that's what I've done. So there's a potential for absolutely anybody to tap into that. And that's how we can also say that we are, I'll repeat this, that we are connected with everyone else. That's the connection. Just like your mobile phone is separate, your laptop separate, but we can, that people know how to create something that if you put I know if I put if I take a photo on my camera, it can come up on my phone because of all that connection. That's like the individual connection, but I could also see, what's going on from somebody in India because there's a website in India that that I'd be interested in, that kind of thing. So we can do it across the world. The DNA goes beyond that. Do you have any more thoughts on this, Rob, so far?
I've got more thoughts than I can actually work out at
There's
the
so
minute.
much. There's so much to tell
It's
about this.
it's an entirely fascinating subject, and I think something's really important for us to talk about. Um,
Mm.
we were talking earlier about, and I was battling with the concept of how my biological DNA
Mm.
coexists with my spiritual DNA, because I believe there are two elements to my DNA. Um, I love the whole analogy of the computer because we have this vast resource in front of us that we all sit in front of all day, every day in some cases. And I don't know about you, but I open about 2 programs.
Interesting.
And,
Yes.
I've got hundreds of
Yes.
programs that I don't
Yes.
go anywhere near. So I don't use that filing system. And like my DNA is that filing system,
Yeah.
I don't use half my DNA.
Yeah.
I don't use a
Yeah.
quarter of my DNA, quite possibly.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask how much less I use because I don't want to know. Right? It probably will be a bit
Absolutely.
scary.
Mm. Mm.
Um, but yeah, but we were talking earlier about where does it come from and how do I get it?
Mm.
And my thinking is that I have 2 lots of DNA that merge, and that for me is the creation of life. So I have my parents' DNA and their parents' DNA and going back, so that biological lineage
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
comes to me in one form,
Yeah.
and my spiritual DNA looks at that combination and goes, that is the life I can achieve in. That is my life path, and merges with that DNA, and I have then one set of DNA that is both spiritual knowledge from all dimensions and the linear knowledge of my ancestry. So all those memories going past, what did my grandmother think? What did my
Mm.
many, many times great grandmother think? What did the first ever time of me think back
Mm.
in the depths of time? And all those, it's quite easy and quite popular to do past life regression.
Mm.
And that for me is just accessing your DNA records and going,
I
oh, I can
absolutely
remember
agree.
this. And those memories that come out usually have a purpose. so that this life path is not blocked by those memories.
Mm. Mm.
And the same with the spiritual DNA, that if I ask for my DNA to be fixed, healed, developed, I ask the spiritual DNA to download
Mm.
and to upgrade that combination of DNA.
Yeah.
I've always called it strands. You like to call it layers, which I think is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and talk a bit about that, Julie, because we often say, biologically we see this double helix, so we see two
That's
strands of
right.
DNA,
Yeah.
but we know there's more.
Yes, I don't always like to call it strands just because scientifically I'm not I'm not a scientist and don't know too much about the strands. But the way I like to see it, I got very much into watching videos from a gentleman called Lee Carroll who channels Cryon. And again, I've discerned this. And if you go watching this, please discern it for yourself. But I was fascinated with the many years that Lee Carroll worked with Cryon to tell the world, to tell us about DNA. And that we have, as Rob said, we have like the biological, I'm going to say the DNA that creates the physical matter. So the DNA from parents that create, blonde hair, blue eyes, or whatever it would be. So yes, and we can all agree that's because it's tangible and we have that. But if you look beyond just these physical strands of DNA that create the human form, there is beyond that what I would class as layers. And so there's more of a etheric or energetic, and going up to a light body layer. The ultimately Cryon talks of the 12 strands of DNA, and we do know there will be more because there's always infinite, but let's stick to today to the 12 strands of DNA. And we talk about that in every layer of DNA has a different capability, has a different job to do. So ultimately, the 12th strand would be, let's say, almost like your source layer, or ultimately what I would class as the God code, so not this religious code, but the God code being, the one, for me, the God code is number one. That's it. When you work things out like that. So we've got the God code at layer 12. We've got other functions of the different layers, and that is there's a couple of layers that work together, and those layers can create what we've been talking about, like what we would class as like a akashic record. So would create the memory, a storage of memory of something, an incident that happened that you can tap into. So so that's all the layers. Now those layers, to me, as well as I've been studying both with the guides and with other people and looking at videos and being on courses, etc., to me, please discern this for yourself, but to me, those layers are then connected with the 12, you've got the 7 physical layers, if you like, of chakras, or the chakras that work into the dimensions that create the physical body and emit and receive information for the physical body. But you've also got beyond that, so you've got the 12 layers that go into, that correlate with the 12 chakras, so the physical body and the energetic body and the light body, that then correspond with 12 dimensions. So there's lots of 12s going on here. So 12 layers of DNA strands, 12 dimensions, 12 chakras, all related, all going into those, that information, each different doing a different function. Even the dimensions are a different function. They do, we don't see all the dimensions because the frequency is such that it's too high for us to see in the physical, but they still very much are part of our body, and how our body reads and emits certain information through those dimensions. But let's stick with just the DNA part of it, because we could go on forever with this. So if we look at DNA and we talk about things like DNA activation, so I can say, through a client, I might use my light language to help a client open up and activate DNA. And we can also talk about deprogramming DNA and programming DNA. So first of all, what is DNA activation? Very simply, it is just how our DNA opens up to the memory. It's just remembering more. So this question of who am I, if we activate our DNA more, all we're doing is opening up that memory storage. It's like opening up another book, if you like, and saying, in this book, here's this memory of Julie in a past life, or Julie as a galactic form, or Julie as an angelic form. Who is Julie as a whole aspect of herself. And that is all recorded, stamped, recorded in our own individual human body DNA, and moving into the 12 strands as you go towards the 12 strands and really think about that. And when we go within and go, show me what's going on in the in the 12th layer of DNA, and it might not be fully activated, but there'll be bits of information coming through. As Rob said, there is can you imagine with DNA 12 layers and 12 strands of DNA, how much the array of information that there possibly is? Because at that level, it then doesn't quite, it then isn't a separation, it then becomes more of the more of the one. So as we said, the god, the god code level. So the one level, when you get there, when you just have that knowing and experience that, I get it now. We are just one. There's a nothingness and an everythingness at that level of consciousness as well. You could call it levels of consciousness if you wanted to. But as we work further down and come back down into human forms, what is it we can do with that? Well, as we start understanding our full scope of layers of DNA and we start activating, so in other words, opening up that memory, it enables us to get all sorts of information. Might be a little bit drip feeding at a time, because our mind, when it comes through and it goes into our brain and our minds, our monkey mind, as I say, will start feeding through to it. We can only deal, as Rob said, we can only deal with a minuscule amount of information. Again, the scientists know that through our reticular activation system. We just pick out the things that we want and wish to focus on, whether that's the good memories or the bad memories, and the good information and the bad information, the good data and the bad data. We choose what we want to extract and pick out and bring to our conscious mind, our monkey mind, if you want, and even into our ego. We choose what we want to pick out. So with that choice, we can use it to play victim and remember, and always consider, oh, there was a memory of I had this happened to me and that happened to me, so I'm going to stay in victim mode. Or we can choose to see that and unwind it and unravel it and start healing from that. So if we talk about the Akashic records, for instance, and looking at it in a memory, if it's all within us, it's, again, this might be so controversial to people who go off, who want to go on courses and things to look at Akashic records. There is an element of reading it in a certain way and how we perceive it. There is a danger of perceiving it wrongly, but ultimately, we don't need to look on the outside for the Akashic records. It's all within. So even the Akashic records, let's call it, so even the memories of what's happened in world history, for instance. Let's just take, for a lot of us that are healers and practitioners, let's take the memory of witches and the witch wounds that we may carry through with us. So that's a story that we're carrying in our DNA. And we may look into the record, we may say, was I a witch? Was I this? Was I that? Was I burned at the stake or whatever, was I hung? And we may see all that, but what we've got to interpret there is, was that my memory? Or ultimately, we could be tapping in to more of the collective memory. And we might need to connect into the collective memory to have that deeper knowing and understanding from an observer view of, this needs to heal. We need to transcend this. We don't need this for anyone. We don't need this for the collective. And this is what we're, as healers, we're using to transcend through the, well, and it would connect into the matrix, and we'll look at that on a different day. But we need to transcend that, the memory from those that will be associated with certain emotions. We need to transcend that, and that's what we can do. But we just need to be aware of, was this memory mine? So go to the witch wounds and the witch memories, or actually am I just looking into something else? And that's the fascination for me as well, and the beauty of it all as well. So Rob, do you have anything else?
It's, I guess, my understanding then that DNA is my authentic self. This is the
Yes.
blueprint I have been given to live the life
Yeah.
that I have chosen to live right now, and I've been given absolutely every computer program I need to complete it. So
Yes.
it's up to me then which programs I open,
Mm.
which packages I choose to learn and use,
Mm.
and that all the knowledge I could ever want, I have. I just have to ask for it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
work on it, and allow it to come through. I mean, when you and I have worked, I've been through multiple lives or
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
And my first ever recollection, I remember once asking, what was my first experience on Earth as a human,
Mm.
in
Mm.
however many human lives I've had.
Mm.
And that was really clear that I was a herbalist.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
back way, 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 way long ago in an area that we now call Armenia.
Mm.
And I was able to see where I died of exposure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I would be able to find that spot now.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's
Yeah.
under farmland.
Mm.
I know that I was something of an outcast and that I was bullied and that I was chased by groups of sort of virile young men who were showing off. But then in secret, those same people would come to me for healing. And I know that it
Yes.
was a long and difficult life of hardship, but I know it with complete certainty. And, however many centuries have passed, many, now here I am back at the healing point,
Mm. Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and I can still pick references in my life, like the bullying, that still spin through my life cycle and my
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I think allowing access to your DNA, and whether you call it the Akashic Records or you
Mm.
don't even go there, it doesn't really matter
Mm-hmm.
to me, is trusting that you have this information available and
Mm.
opening up, allowing spirit to come into you in whichever way you choose to do that. Just be open to it and ask to be shown what you already know. And inevitably, as you will have experienced as well, the information you get is the information you need
Yes.
at that
Yes.
particular time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just downloaded with randomness, you're downloaded with an upgrade to your DNA that you need to answer a question you're asking.
Mm.
And then you take some time as your body goes, ouch, what was that? And you have to sort of process it and go, okay, I get it now. And then you're ready to get another download.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
sometimes those downloads can really whack you and sometimes they're really mild. Depends how much you get at a given time.
Mm.
So, we get that blueprint of DNA, but it's not static.
Mm.
You know, it grows, it changes, it morphs, it can be added to, it can be opened. Because ultimately we have to hand it back
Mm.
and let somebody else
We do.
use it
Mm.
and come back. And I suppose one of the thinkings of my life has always been, you live a life, you learn so much about everything, and that bundle of energy, when your physical body decides to pack up and move on, that energy thing goes back to source
Yeah.
and enriches
Yes.
source.
Yeah.
And then that little bit that you've learned buzzes around and comes back to another life
Yeah.
at a slightly higher level. And so we go, and so we raise our ascendancy. So I think I've probably wandered slightly off the DNA story there, but that's just the way my mind processes it.
No, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That it all fits in with it, even if we don't think about it as DNA, it all
Yeah.
fits in. So what we can add to this slightly is, so we have our original DNA, the 12, the 12 strands of DNA, or 12 layers, as I like to call it, of DNA. Ultimately, based from our, I'm going to call it our individual source. So from our source, our origins, if you like, and my origins at this level might be different to Rob's, might be the same or different. So, my source, it's ultimately our original blueprint, if you like, and maybe soul's original blueprint, all beautiful, all would be in this wonderful frequency of earth. But then what, as Rob's saying, is we can look into the memories and actually then see the distortions. So remember when I was saying we look into memories and we can either see it as being a victim, or we can perceive it as, that's something I need to grow. So what Rob's saying there is, in another life as a human, he was bullied. And that is coming right through. You can see how that comes right through to our life right now. And so that DNA is creating that story, because there's what we class as an imprint. So as well as your original blueprint with this, of beautiful DNA, beautiful light codes, there's also a kind of, if I said a darker, and I don't mean it in a very negative sense, but there's also kind of darker side in the, let's still be light-hearted about this. In this, as I say, we can have this falseness. So we would, how we would talk about karma. There's a slight falseness in the matrix that's been around the earth for quite a number of, let's say, years. Here is that, through this entrapment, we can also have the stories of DNA that are not the true stories. And that's what we've got to heal and transcend from. So the stories of bullying, for instance, that's not a nice frequency on a new earth. I recently, but bullying can also be from from after source, all the experiences you've had. So it can be information coming through that where it would create your story and your identity of, I've been bullied in this life. It can come through from other human lives, but it can also come through from a higher life. I will just explain a little bit. There was something going on for me personally and in the world, because I was seeing, again, I'm going to go with the white Fiesta analogy. I was focusing on this particular situation and this feeling. And the feeling I realized afterwards was disrespect. And the way I got that information about, wow, so much disrespect to the planet, to other people, and this needs to be removed, this needs to be transcended. But when I went into my records, what I ended up with was, I was another planet. And at first, my first feelings are, really, am I getting this right? Was I a planet? But what I realized was, more than trying to go into like, let's call it a record, into my memory, going, was I a planet? What was this? It's like, move away from that and just understand the knowingness of that consciousness that was a planet that is equally the same as our beautiful planet Earth. So that's a consciousness as well. So that's how we are all as one with the Earth. That I was as one with this other planet that was somewhere beyond in the universe. It didn't matter where it was, but I had that knowing, that consciousness, it was actually a collective consciousness. So I was part of a bigger collective, and it could be that many millions of us were that collective as well. But the beings they weren't humans, but the beings on this planet absolutely trashed this planet and left it completely no water, completely barren, no life. When there's no water, no life, and the beans just went off. The planet was no use anymore after being full of life. It was just stripped bare, and the beans went off. And I thought, was just that planet just felt that consciousness, that knowing is just total disrespect. And that's how I go. That's my working day. That's a life of Julie in a working day. You can have all sorts of things, but what it, if you come back to what it means is that, yeah, literally this is what Earth must feel like. And this is where, if I'm hurting Earth, I'm hurting myself, because we are all one. And this is how we can understand DNA to be all one. We can create the individualization, so I can create the physical matter of Julie, but I can also feel the higher aspects of our higher layers of DNA as all being one connection, and how we need to heal and heal the earth as well as us, in order to be in this new, what we want to be, the new Earth paradigm, the new Earth reality. We need to understand and strip away these imprints, these beliefs that we've got from the false part of Earth, or the false matrix that's hurting us and damaging us. But it's all okay, because we are moving on from that. Lovely. Do you have anything else to say, Rob? Or I think on that note, that is probably enough
I'm
for
thinking
today.
that is probably as much
Yeah.
thinking as we need.
Yes.
I think we need to revisit, because there's so much more to
So
say
much more.
on
Yeah.
this, but I think you and I also need to connect up and get some guidance
Yes,
as to what
definitely.
we want to bring,
Yes.
podcast wise, in terms of
Yes.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating and interesting.
Mm.
God, I'd really like to hear what people think.
Yeah,
Have they
definitely
experience of
with
DNA?
DNA.
So if you're
Mm.
listening to this and you have any thoughts, please comment, because we'd really like to know.
Yeah.
Helps us.
Really do. We do it for, we do it for the listeners.
Yeah.
We really want to know what everybody is saying, is thinking
Yeah.
about. Yeah. Lovely.
Good.
Okay. That's the end of this podcast. So bye for now.
Bye bye.